Welcome to Small Arms Solutions Crime Series. We haven't done any crime series in a while, but I think this will be well worth your wait for a new crime series. This one here is going to be a little bit different because I don't have any guns to show you. They're all going to be done with photographs. This took place in January of 2010 while I was working for Colt. We received a phone call from the Colombian government down in Colombia. The Colombian army had captured a cache of 200 M4 type rifles, M16 type rifles. They were on their way to the FARC. And when they were looking at them, they were marked Colt, but they just seemed like they were off. They possibly, where they were not. They were not really sure. So I was asked to go down to Colombia, to Bogota, to take a look at all these rifles. And so I looked at 200 rifles. And I have to say, I was really, really shocked at what I saw, because again, this was 2010. Now, the first thing that I learned when I went down there was Colt rifles are worth more money than any other AR out there. So if you can pass them off as a Colt, you get more money. So that's what we found. We looked at 20 guns, and I'm just going to go through a few of these here that I found that were really, really interesting. And you're going to see the photographs of them. So the first thing we're going to look at is gun 1. Now, gun 1 was marked Colt M16, as you can see from the photograph. Now, that is not how Colt marks their guns. It was never marked in that way. Not to mention, if you look, it says Colt Defense on there. If it was a Colt M16, it would have been Colt's Manufacturing Firearms Division back in those days, and I doubt you would even have seen a Colt Industries that was marked that way. But then you take a look at the selector lever on here. Safe Fire Auto, never done. Also, if you look at the way these are marked, these are laser engraved, these are not roll marked. So that gives you a perfect example right there. These are not Colts. And this one here was also converted to full auto. Now, they even took the time to grind down the selector stops that were on here. So after we get done with the rifle, the lower receiver, especially having a certain range that never existed with Colt, we take a look at the rest of the parts that were on there. And of course, we had an A2 upper receiver, which was non-Colt marked. It was just a serial forge code, unmarked pencil barrel, a 16-inch barrel, commercial stock on there. So the rifle that we had here obviously was marked Colt and was made in probably some jungle someplace. Now the finish on here is not an anodizing, it's some kind of a baked on type finish, and you can see a lot of the raw material in there as well. So looking at this rifle, clearly not a Colt. This was one that was made to look like a Colt. Next we're going to look at is gun 4. Now again, this was not a Colt. This was Rock Island Arsenal made by Olympic. So this one was very interesting in the fact, too, that this was a real rifle that we can see from the picture of a lot of the hydrogen embezzlement from the jungles of Colombia. So we see the front of the magazine well where it's very much so damaged. Now, from what we saw here, this looked like it was an original receiver, but we could not tell for sure because there was no finish on it. Now, certainly the finish could have come off, but we really couldn't tell for sure. So then we take a look at the left side. Again, this was semi-automatic only. This one was not converted to full auto. Now, the upper receiver, the way that it was marked, LM, so it was Martin Marietta, and L would basically be a military subcontractor. So, again, we basically have a parts kit gun here. This also had one of those FA suppressors on there, like a FA moderator, which would be constant with some of these parts kits. So this one was a really interesting one as well, even though that was not one of the fake Colts. The next one that we had was gun 5. Now, gun 5 was a real M16A1 lower receiver. This was what we referred to as an export gun. Now, when you look at the side of the receiver, you can see where the marks on the left side are all destroyed. There was no way to be able to recover the serial number on here. But this was an actual Colts Firearms Manufacturing, Colts Firearms Division, safe semi-auto. So when we get down to looking at the upper receiver, the upper receiver was Colt as well. It was a CH Colt Harvey aluminum, and it was an A1 upper receiver. Now when we take a look at the stock, this was a A1 type stock, and it had a 14.5-inch Colt marked barrel on it, missing the ejection port cover. So this was one of the few factory Colts that we saw there that still remained a lot of Colt parts on there. Again, we had a standard A1 sight stock on there. And no cartridge case deflector. Gun 6 was actually a Bushmaster. Now, this was a complete Bushmaster rifle, so the ATF and the Colombian ATF are wondering how this sucker got in there. But as we can see from the magazine well, that it was defaced, but all the parts on here were Bushmaster. Safe semi-auto, it was converted to full auto. The upper receiver had a Bushmaster marking on it. The stock was Bushmaster on it, so we had a complete Bushmaster rifle. Now, gun 7, this is where it really gets interesting for Colts. As you can see, it's marked Colt M16 Commando Enhanced. serial number LE. Now, this completely never existed at Colt. The model, the Colt Enhanced, was never M16. It was Colt M4 Enhanced, and what Enhanced meant that it was safe semi-auto burst. So this model never existed. Also notice that this is mostly in the raw, so the finish came right off of it. So if it was a Colt Enhanced rifle, it would have been Colt Defense. It would not have been Colt's Patent Manufacturing Firearms Division. And this is a safe semi-auto. So this was a completely fabricated FAW Colt lower receiver. Again, serial number range didn't exist. The model never existed. So now we look at the upper receiver. The upper receiver was a A2 upper receiver. There's no factory code on it. It was a serial forging code. You had a 16-inch pencil barrel that there was no manufacturer that was on. Again, it was a parts kit. It was a two-position buttstock assembly. And it was obviously a Parks gun. But again, this was something that somebody made to appear to be a Colt, that we will identify as being a fake Colt. Now, Gun 10, for some reason, was a complete Spikes tactical rifle. As we can see from the photographs, you can see it's a Spike serial number. It was converted safe semi-auto, but there was no auto sear installed. We see a USMC laser engraved on the side. So we had a complete Spikes tactical rifle here. Now, Gun 11 was really, really interesting. This is what we refer to as a M16A2 export rifle. Export means it was either for law enforcement or for export. It wasn't property U.S. government marked. This was an actual receiver. Now, when you look at the lower receiver, the bolt catch has been completely removed and welded over, which is really, really interesting how they were able to do that. And if you look at the selector was safe semi-auto, which would be normal. Colts Patent Firearms Manufacturing Company, that completely falls in line, and it's proper serial number range. Upper receiver, this is where it gets interesting. On the right side, you'll notice there was a modification to the front pivot pin where it was welded. Well, the reason why that was is when we looked at it, this was a Colt SP1 AR-15 upper receiver, large front pivot pin hole. So this gun was welded to accept this SP1 upper receiver. Colt Martin Marietta forging code, Colt 16-inch barrel, CMPB, it was marked. The stock was a Colt Type 2, which was not the polymer, it was a polymer type stock. So we do have pretty much a Colt rifle here, but it was sort of bastardized and put together, and it was hacked up pretty good. Now, this was another Colt rifle that we found that was an actual Colt rifle. This would be our Gun 13. Now, this was based off of a Colt Match Target lightweight lower receiver. Now, we can see from the photographs that we do have a regular Colt serial number. CSL is a Colt prefix. But this also has the 170 diameter hammer trigger pins, and it has the auto sear block. So when this left the factory, this would have not had a factory stock on it. It would have generally had a fixed stock on it, or something that was pinned because it was made during the ban era. Now looking at the upper receiver was a Colt Mueller brass, and it was a 14.5-inch barrel, and it was a Colt marked barrel. Gun 15. This one was really, really interesting because it was marked, as you can see, Colt AR-15A2 Sporter 2, Cal 223, and the way the serial number was. This one here was an immediate red flag. First off, this was completely in the raw aluminum. There was absolutely no finish on it whatsoever. Now, if it was actual Colt AR-15A2 Sporter 2, it would have been a large hole. It would have been the screw and collet. And those would have all been manufactured. It would have been Colt's Firearms Division, Colt Industries. That would not have been Colt's Manufacturing Company. So that was an immediate one right there. And the serial number for that would have been an SP prefix. This was something else that was totally different. As we can see from the selector, safe and fire, which would have been right. However, you have your stop notches that are still on there. This one was not converted over. The upper receiver was non-Colt. It was looks like it was a 12.5-inch barrel, A2 upper receiver. So we had a complete gun here that was manufactured to look like a Colt. There was nothing Colt about it whatsoever. Now we have Gun 19. We have another M16 Commando enhanced rifle. Again, Colts. This model never existed. This serial number never existed. This was Safe Fire Auto, which never existed as well. It was drilled for an auto sear. So this was another rifle that was manufactured to pass off as a Colt. So there was a lot of different rifles that were like this. And in Gun 20, here's just another perfect example. Some of these even had the same serial number on them, which was how original they were. But Gun 20 again was the same M16 Commando enhanced, safe semi-auto, non-existent serial number, range, non-existent model, laser engraved. And at this time, laser engraving was not done by Colt. It's funny because with Gun 20, when you look at the markings, you even look at the way the Colt is, the way the snake is basically on the C. That's wrong. So again, looking at the details on here, we were able to determine, again, there were some guns that were Colt, and there were some guns that were not. The last gun that we're going to take a look at here was another one of these, Gun 21 was another one of these Colt AR-15A2 Sporter 2s. Now again, we see raw aluminum, lower receiver, no finish on it, Colt's manufacturing instead of Colt Industries. Safe fire, which would have been proper, but we have selector stops on there. Serial number has an M prefix. Again, if a Colt AR-15A2 would have been an SP prefix. What we learned when we were down there was that there is a big aftermarket out there for guns that would look like Colt, that would pass off for Colt, that would make more money. Now, most of these guns that I saw, I would never even attempt to fire. Many of these had missing pieces, they had damaged pieces, they had broken pieces. They were certainly not guns that were usable. But the interesting thing was, I think from the law enforcement standpoint, wasn't the fact of the way they were marked, because again, anybody can do that. The fact that they had 80% type lower receivers, or they had forgings, they were manufacturing these somewhere in the jungle, but they were getting American-made parts kits. Because a lot of these parts kits, these were American parts. There was one of these upper receivers that was an Armalite forged upper receiver. We had, again, the guns that came in that were Spikes Tactical, Olympic Arms, Bushmasters that were complete rifles. Then we had the guns that were put together with just a mixed match of parts. But this is one of the interesting things that you do, when you work for manufacturers. You go and you find really weird things like this. Here we have 80% lower receivers. People manufacture guns, to do clones and whatnot. This long predates this. This is 2010, and this was done for a military sale to the FARC. So again, it's been a while since we did a crime series. I thought we'd save you a real doozy on this one, because I thought you'd find this one very, very interesting. So hope you guys enjoy this video. Please click like, please subscribe, and even better, share.